Hello guys, welcome to a brand new video, and today I'm here with Red Tie Politics, and we're going to be discussing possible Biden and Trump pathways to a victory in the 2024 presidential election. Say hi, Red Tie.
Hello.
Alright, so I'm going to get started simply just by filling in states that I think both candidates have a pretty good chance of winning. So probably like more than 5%. There you go. There you go. And then for Biden at the West Coast, Hawaii, Virginia. I do not think all these states are going to be safe. I simply, just want to make it clear which states I think are going to be most likely going to a certain candidate. I forgot DC, and then Florida. Okay, so this is, I think, the battleground map with Biden at 226 electoral votes, Donald Trump at 219, with 93 electoral votes up for grabs. North Carolina is kind of close to just being pretty safe for Trump. However, the Biden campaign has made a lot of attempts to break that hold that Republicans have had on the state since 2008. However, it's going to be tough for them because of minority turnout and especially the large African American community that you see in a lot of these big cities in North Carolina, where Biden simply isn't doing as good. So I think for now, we can probably mark this as a Trump state. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
So, a very similar case is that in Georgia. However, it did vote for Biden in 2020. It voted blue in the Senate in 2022, and it is shifting left pretty fast. However, much like with North Carolina, its big problem is simply minority turnout and Democrats getting minorities on their side, and Trump is gaining a lot with minorities. However, the big difference between Georgia and North Carolina is Biden can compensate for that with a lot of suburbanites. It's how he won the state in 2020, and it's actually how he won a large part of the election. However, I simply just do not think he's going to be able to do it to as much of an extent this election cycle as he did in 2020. So for now, I'm also going to be putting that in the Trump category. So that puts us at 251 electoral votes for Trump to 226 for Joe Biden. And that really highlights, once we've put together these 216 electoral vote states that are most likely going for Trump, it highlights how much of an uphill battle this really is for Joe Biden. So from here on out, there are a couple of pathways for a Biden victory. I think the most likely one is Pennsylvania, where we see, it's Biden's home state. Well, technically Delaware is, but he's from Pennsylvania. Michigan, which is, I guess, the most left swing state there is. And I think a lot of the Arab Americans in the state who protested Biden in the primaries will end up backing him, and at the very least stay home, not vote for Trump, because Trump is even worse on the Palestine issue. And then what would bring him over to 271 is Arizona, where there's a lot of moderate voters and a lot of voters that don't necessarily agree with Donald Trump. He denied the election. They view him as more far right. So I think they would they could reluctantly side with Biden, and that would barely bring him over 270. However, once you take away Pennsylvania from Joe Biden, it puts him back at 252, and that really highlights how much of a must-win Pennsylvania really is. Because if you give him Wisconsin and you give him Nevada, he still does not win the election. Donald Trump, all he needs is Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania, and he gets over 270 electoral votes. Whereas Biden, In order for him to break that, if Trump wins Pennsylvania, he would need Georgia, or he would need North Carolina. And that is going to be much harder than him just taking Pennsylvania. And the issue is, he's doing pretty bad in Pennsylvania. I'm not saying the polls are correct. I don't think he's down by 7 or down by 5 or whatever the polls are saying. I think the polls are overestimating Trump in a lot of these cases. This is a lot of shock from after the debate and after, how horrible Biden truly did in the debate. But I still think it's going to leave an impact in voters, especially if the Democrats don't replace him and he does bad in the next debates, because there's still 2 more debates, and I think Joe Biden is going to agree to those debates. So I think while he's not down by 7 in Pennsylvania, I think he's like down by 1 right now currently. And I think this is probably like the most likely map for like a narrow Trump victory. And it shows all he really needs is 3 states, where Biden needs to go against the odds and win in one of the states where Trump is doing the best in the polls. Because if he can't do that, then he has to go against the odds even more and go for a state like Georgia or go for a state like North Carolina. What do you think, RTP?
Yeah, I mean, definitely it's going to be a really hard fight for Biden to win the election in 2024, just because you have a lot of these moderate voters from Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, who are going to probably vote for Trump 50-50. And a lot of also black voters. You're going to have a lot of these black voters going for Trump just because they don't like how Biden's handling, like the economy, for example, or immigration, or a lot of these main issues to this day. The wars in Ukraine, the Israel-Hamas war. You have a lot of these people who do not support that or want to see a change, and they're going to vote for Trump. I'm not saying that there's going to be a majority of black voters voting for Trump. I think it's going to be a little bit more than 2020, just because if you saw the polls, Biden had 87% of black voters voting for him. Now he's just above 70. So really you see that change. Really one of the issues for Biden is Georgia and Pennsylvania. Really, if Trump wins North Carolina, Georgia, and he's really close in Pennsylvania, where he's doing really, really good, like in the last poll from Bloomberg Morning Consult, had him up by 7. And I agree with Sammy, I do not think he's up by 7. He's more closer to 1 or half a point. Really, Nevada is going to be one of those interesting states where it voted for Biden by 2, more like Michigan. But you see these polls, and Trump's up by 2 points, 3 points there. So really, you think what went wrong? Well, you have a lot of these voters coming from different states that are moving to Vegas, moving to Carson City, moving to a lot of these areas in Nevada, and you have a lot of these Democrats moving places else, like Texas, for example, and other states. Same thing for California, which is one of these states where a lot of people haven't talked about. You have a lot of these Democratic voters moving to Florida, moving to Texas, and actually changing their party registration, just because they see the Florida dream and all that. Really, I think it's a little really a uphill battle for Biden, just because he would need the Rust Belt states, and if he doesn't win at Pennsylvania or Wisconsin, it's just going to be a really, really hard fight for him. He would need, like, a Georgia, for example. He would need a North Carolina, which is going to be very hard, just because North Carolina voted slim for Trump, just because Biden did well in the state, and Biden barely won Georgia in 2020, and I think that's going to get reversed. Really, I mean, do you agree with this, Sammy? I mean, really,
yeah, absolutely.
it's going to be hard for Biden.
I think there are 2 major strategies that the Biden campaign could go for here. We've already talked, I guess 3. This is what I think would be the most likely one that would get them over the top with Arizona, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. However, I think there are 2 more that could work, which specifically rely on certain regions. There's the Rust Belt path with Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which would barely get him over 270. However, if they miss a single electoral vote, that could be a faithless elector, which would not go over well, or even Nebraska's second, then that would bring them to 269 and a tie. So 270 isn't really that secure, but it could work. His biggest flaw is while Michigan could be okay for him, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin are certainly not likely, or certainly an uphill battle, especially in Pennsylvania where he is so far behind in the polls. Another way we could possibly see him win is with a Sunbelt strategy, where he takes Nevada, Arizona, which could happen, especially in Arizona, and then this is where the reach comes, possibly Georgia and North Carolina, where he could overcompensate, or where he could compensate for possibly Trump winning in the Rust Belt, and that would get him over the finish line. However, it's so hard for him to win North Carolina and Georgia, especially in North Carolina. North Carolina has not voted blue since 2008, and although you could say maybe it's shifting to the left, it's just hard for me to see him driving up black turnout enough for him to win the state. And without North Carolina, if Trump wins the Rust Belt, he is cooked, okay? He's not winning Texas. It's very hard for me to see him winning that. There would be a 5-point shift to the right or to the left in a year where the nation overall is probably going to shift to the right. So he needs to win at least one state in the Rust Belt. You know, like even if he wins Wisconsin, that wouldn't get him over the top. It would actually be a tie. He would need to win like Michigan, for example, for this to happen. But this is getting kind of wacky. Point is, the biggest state that he needs to fight over is Pennsylvania. That is 19 electoral votes, and if he wins that, so many opportunities start to present themselves. It could be Michigan and Wisconsin. It could be Michigan and Arizona. It could be Wisconsin, Nevada, and Arizona. The point is, just a lot of opportunities start to present themselves. And I think it is kind of a waste of money for them to try to make this push in North Carolina or even maybe Georgia, because, just shifting to the entire black vote, he's starting to lose in this election. I still think he's going to do quite well in it compared to Trump. However, it's going to be a decrease in 2020 when for him to win a state like North Carolina, he's going to need to actually gain. And I just can't see that happening. So if Trump wins North Carolina and even wins Georgia, which is quite similar, except maybe Biden could overcompensate or could compensate in like the suburbs. But, even if if Trump wins Georgia, Biden needs Pennsylvania, because, if Trump wins Pennsylvania on top of that, then it's over.
I mean, really, if we're going to talk about the polls, which I also bring up the poll in Pennsylvania that had Trump up by 7, that poll is a really bad poll just for one reason. It had Biden up by like 5 in Michigan, 6 in Michigan for the 6-way, and 4 or 5 in Wisconsin. That one is a really big reach in that poll, and it only had Trump up by 1 in Georgia. That poll was just a really bad conducted poll. And really, they probably needed a little bit more raw voters or likely voters in that case scenario, just because they probably went into here's the issue with these polls. They go into different areas that probably have a way more like Republican vote or Democrat vote. Really, you can't go off the polls. You have to go off of something else. You have to go off either the 13 keys or you have to go off something else. It's just really difficult, not a little, but really difficult for Biden to possibly win a Pennsylvania or a Georgia or even a North Carolina, just because you have a lot of these black voters, these women voters that are going to shift towards the right. And it's just going to be a little difficult for the Democrats. They would have to go over a big hurdle to definitely win the state of Pennsylvania or Georgia. Like Biden barely won the state of Pennsylvania by 1.1 when he was forecasted to win it by a couple of points in 2020. Same thing for Michigan and Wisconsin. Like, you have these states that Biden was supposed to win by almost double digits. For example, Michigan, but he only won it by 2. You see what I mean? Like, it's going to be a little difficult.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the Democrats' trap card, you could say, is if Republicans were to win a Pennsylvania or even like a Nevada or a Wisconsin, one way that that they think they could possibly pull this out is by flipping the big one, which is Texas. However, I just can't see this happening. Texas is shifting to the left. However, I think that is going to be countered by the entire nation as a whole, probably shifting to the right. I think in the end is going to be around the same margin as in 2020. And I can't see the nation most likely shifting to the right and Texas shifting to the left by 5% from 2020. That is just impossible. I think any like Democratic eyes that are going to Texas should instead be placed on a state that could actually win them the election, like Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think this is probably it. I think I agree with what you said. The polls just, I haven't really trusted any polls that include Trump being on the ballot because the Trump effect is just unprecedented. A poll could be underestimating Trump or it could be overestimating Trump. We just don't know. They've lost a lot of security from before Trump was into politics. Every single election from 2016 to 2020, even to now, when we see a lot of polls being really wonky, I just don't think you can predict with polls how the election is actually going to go. And I think there could be a major polling error where Biden maybe, I think Biden best case scenario could, in a great night, maybe just upset the polls and win 319. But the polls could indeed be the polls could still be wrong, and even then, Trump still could win. They could still overestimate Trump by a bit, and he could still get 312 electoral votes, simply just because of how far they have him ahead. The polls had Biden ahead by 5 or 7 or something in 2020. He only won by 1. I think you could see the same thing with Trump in 2024. The polls have him ahead by a ton in these states, 13 or something in Nevada. He could only win by 1 or 2, but it's still possible. The polls could be off, but they could still they could be very off, points off, but Trump could still win these states.
Yeah.
So I think this is where we could wrap it up. I think the most likely path to a Biden victory is just this: Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona. He has a few more possible ways with just the Rust Belt or something like that. But this just really highlights how much of an uphill battle it is for him. He could win literally every single other swing state except for North Carolina, Georgia, and Pennsylvania and still lose the election. The Democrats, I think, should just stop looking at North Carolina and fully divert their funding into Georgia and Pennsylvania, and especially into Pennsylvania, because that 20 electoral votes, or 19, is just so important to Biden getting a second term. Any final thoughts?
No, yeah, I completely agree with you. The Biden campaign really needs to spend a lot of time, not really even in Georgia. They really need to spend it in Pennsylvania, because that's what wins the election. You see, Trump, all he needs is Georgia and Pennsylvania, like you said. So really, if they want to divert that and Trump needs to get more states, they really need to spend time in Pennsylvania or in any other state that can get him that equivalent of 19 electoral votes, which really the only state would be Texas or Florida, which is not going to happen. But they really need to spend a lot of time in Pennsylvania, just because you haven't seen Biden really spend that much time. He spent time in Philly, which won't really help him that much. He's spending time in a Biden plus 60 district. You really want to spend time per se in Northampton County or like in Erie County, for example. Like he would need to spend time in these swing counties that will go either way. So really, Biden needs to spend time. He needs to be smart. Right now, I don't think that's going his way right now. Really, like you said before, I think it's more like a Trump plus one state at the moment. Really, I have Trump at 312 barely. Arizona can go either way, just because you have a lot of these white voters, you have a lot of these moderate voters that can go either way, and Arizona can go either way. Really, I have it between 301 and 312. But yeah, that's really it. Biden just needs to spend a lot of time in Pennsylvania, spend time there. He will win the election if he does that.
Yeah, I agree. Um, Although, like, he shouldn't forget about, like, a Michigan or a Wisconsin or an Arizona. He shouldn't, like, pull a Hillary Clinton and not focus on these key states. Him
Yeah, I
winning
agree.
Pennsylvania, like, just Pennsylvania, like, wouldn't be enough. He would need to,
Yeah,
also, like, overperform in a state like Michigan or Wisconsin to be able
yeah,
to pull this off.
yeah.
Um, so if we're done, then, make sure you guys, go subscribe to Red Tie Politics. He's been great. If you're looking for someone who can maybe deliver from the more centrist to even more conservative point of view in this election, or give more detailed view with better uploads, go subscribe to him. So make sure you guys like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. See you.